Good evening. My name is Anthony Marshy. I'm a sophomore here at Georgetown. I'd like to thank you all for coming. It's a privilege to have Carlos Ghosn, the CEO and chairman of Nissan and Renault, lecture for us on leadership in the auto industry. Thank you, Mr. Ghosn, for being with us today. Special thanks to the Lecture Fund, StartUpHoyas, the GRLA, and the Cloudcast team for making this event possible. Just a few words on Cloudcast. Cloudcast is a social news app startup developed by a team of Georgetown and Harvard students, of which I am a founder. We are currently in the beta testing phase and would appreciate it if you all took the time to submit your emails on your way out to join the beta for a chance to win an Amazon gift card. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Carlos Ghosn.
Welcome to this evening's keynote, Disruptive Leadership in the Global Auto Industry, a conversation with Carlos Ghosn, Chairman and CEO of Renault-Nissan Alliance. My name is Meredith Cheney, and I'm co-president of StartUpHoyas. This evening's event will be moderated by Mr. Jeff Reed, founding director of the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative, professor of entrepreneurship, and head of StartUpHoyas. Our guest this evening is a highly respected thought leader in the global auto industry. As chairman and chief executive officer of the Renault-Nissan Alliance, he is the first individual to run two Fortune Global 500 organizations simultaneously, credited to saving Nissan, and lastly but not least, introducing the electric car to Asia. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Carlos Ghosn and Mr. Jeff Reed.
Bienvenue.
Merci.
So, Mr. Ghosn, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then towards the end, we're going to ask the audience to participate and ask some questions as well. So, as we've heard a little bit here, you embody the concept of a global business leader. Our business school strives to develop students with a global mindset to be in service of business and society. Having been born in Brazil, grew up in Lebanon, studied in Paris, you lead companies that are based in Japan, in Europe, Russia, and have operations all over the world. Our students here have interests in becoming global business leaders. How has the experience that you've had shaped your leadership style, and how can students who maybe don't have the same multicultural background that you have become global business leaders?
Yeah. Well, I think obviously everyone is going to have his own experience. I did nothing for this because I was born in Brazil, nothing to do with this. With me, I was born, I was lucky. I went to Lebanon. I was a kid. I went back to France to study. And then I started my career in France, went to Brazil, then the United States, then back to France and Japan. And now I'm operating out of two different headquarters, one in Japan and one in France. The first thing and the most important thing I learned through my experience is that in the world in which we are living, in the world in which particularly younger people will be living, one of the most important attributes, no matter what, in order to become an efficient leader on a global level is to develop what I call the sense of empathy, the capacity to connect with other culture, the capacity to understand, to be curious, to be open up, to be seen as part of a culture even though you're not born there and you have not grown there. This is absolutely fundamental element. We try to do that in Renault Nissan, and we know it's not easy, trying to have people from different culture, different countries. I was mentioning the fact that in the executive committee of Nissan, obviously made by 10 people, 5 of them are Japanese. It's normal, it's a Japanese company, but the other 5 are, Spanish. One of them is with me here, Jose Munoz, is part of the executive committee heading the North American operation. Another one is British. The third one is American. The fourth one is French and the Brazilian. So you have 5 Japanese, 5 people coming from different citizenship, and they've been selected not because of their citizenship, but they've been selected because in a certain way they develop an open-mindedness, a capacity to connect with people, because we're dealing with Chinese, we're dealing with Russian, we're dealing with Indonesian, with people from Thailand, people from the Middle East, and you just want to make sure when you have, in a large company, 430,000 people coming from different citizenship, that there is no glass ceiling, that everybody's welcome, that they're going to be judged and promoted and make a career in function of their contribution to the company and not of something else. And obviously this is very easy to say, but much more difficult to be felt. And what is important that in the company people feel that no matter where they're coming from, no matter what is their culture, no matter what is their background or their passport, they're part of one team and they're an equal part of a team, and they can go to the top. So empathy for me is a very important element. And again, it's very difficult to learn empathy in a book. It's much more easy to develop empathy through connecting with people of different background, eventually working in countries which are very different from your own culture, looking for jobs or opportunities or mission where you are being really submitted to different worlds, and particularly having this capacity to see, okay, what can I learn from this culture? What are the strengths of this culture? Because we have a tendency always to see the negative stuff. If somebody is different from me, I look at his weakness. Okay, it takes some discipline to look at his strengths. About, okay, he's different from me. What can I learn from him? How he can make me a better person? So whenever you have this mindset, you're ready. Frankly, you're ready. No matter where you are, no matter where you start, when you have this mindset of empathy about how diversity can enrich you, how somebody different from you can become, an inspiration, forgetting about the weak points, going for the strong points, then you're ready.
Let's take a step back in time to 1999 when the Renault-Nissan Alliance was created. You arrived in Japan without having experience working in Japan, and you didn't have time to develop a lot of empathy. You had to move quickly. So how did the alliance come together? And you made some amazing changes, things that went against the culture of business in Japan, but that also saved the company. What lessons can you share with our audience here about what happened during those times?
It was an extraordinary experience, because first I was not expecting to come to Japan. As you know, when you are raised and educated into the Western part of the world, you learn more about the Western part of the world, and there's very little about what's going on in Asia. So I have very little knowledge of Japan. I didn't speak Japanese. I have a very, very caricatural image about what's going on in this part of the world. And it happens that I had to go to Japan and then contribute to the revival of this company. Just remind you, in 1999, Nissan was the only major company in Japan which was struggling between all the car makers. Toyota was going very strongly, Honda also. A lot of the major Japanese companies were doing well, except Nissan. Nissan has $20 billion debt, didn't make money for the last 10 years, was losing market share. That means it was really about to collapse, and as you know, company always collapse by cash crunch, and this was a situation of cash crunch. So when I was sent there, I didn't know anything about Japan. I didn't speak Japanese, as you know, but I was extremely curious about Japan, extremely curious. So when I was offered the job, and at that moment I was the number 2 guy in Renault, I was told, you know what, if you fail, it's over. I mean, it's over only obviously for Nissan, it's over for you also in Renault, which is fine. I knew exactly what was the risk I was taking, but I didn't hesitate 1 second to take the job, even though not knowing a lot of things about the company, except looking at the P&L statements, etc., because I was extremely curious about Japan. I said, okay, this is a very great learning opportunity, and this is an opportunity to make a difference, because that's what we all want to do, is make a difference and eventually being rewarded for making a difference. So when I started in Japan, I knew that we had to make very tough decisions, but somehow maybe it was accepted because people felt I love Japan. I was interested in Japan. I was willing to learn from Japan as much as I was bringing some experience and some leadership into this company which has been struggling for 10 years. And when I announced the Nissan Revival Plan, October 1999, 3 months after I arrived, in a very rushed period, I said, and this was one of the major key points, I say, if any one of the 2 or 3 objectives that we are putting on the table was not reached, I would resign, and with me all the members of the executive committee, which wrung a strong chord with the Japanese public by saying this guy has nothing to do with the problems of Nissan, but at the same time is willing to put his head on the table just to show how much commitment there was. So in a certain way, a lot of unpleasant decisions were made in terms of reducing headcount, shutting down plants, dismantling the Keiretsu, selling a lot of the shareholdings. We've done a lot of things that were considered as impossible to do in Japan. But what saved everything and made people say, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, is you said, these are the 3 targets, and if any one of them was not reached, I'm out, and with me all the members of the executive committee said, okay, let's see. Okay? So it's not a question of trust me and you'll see, is trust me, and if I am not delivering on the trust you're giving to me, I'm gone, and with me all the people who are going there. And you know the end of the story. It built up. It was a major turnaround. And it was a major turnaround because usually, in the industry in general or in company, you have turnarounds. You have many turnarounds. You say, oh, this turnaround. But the turnaround is not measured over 1 or 2 or 3 years. A turnaround is measured over 10 years, 20 years. Because you have a lot of turnarounds where the company goes much better, and then 3 years after, it goes down again, and then you go to another turnaround, and then it's being bought up, etc. What you have to measure is on the long term. That means, did you really fix the short-term problem and at the same time put the seed for recovery and the growth of the company? That was the thing it is about. And Japanese people from the beginning, they took the bitter pill, probably because we committed, but also because they felt that we were emerged into Japanese society and we wanted to learn and contribute and participate to Japanese society. That was a key issue.
So the evidence shows that you made the right decisions over the short term and the long term. In Japan, you've been named one of the top most respected business leaders there. You've won Asia Businessman of the Year, one of the top 10 business people outside the U.S., all kinds of awards. I understand there are comic books written about you in Japan. You're somewhat of a hero. And of course, over the many years since then, the company's continued to grow and thrive, and the alliance structure is a part of that, and that's still very unique in the industry. What is it about the alliance structure between Renault and Nissan, as other companies have done mergers and acquisitions that have often failed? What makes the alliance strong, and how has it survived and grown over the years?
Yeah, 99, that means what you need to, obviously, it looks for many people who are very young here, 99 is, a long time ago, 16 years ago. But starting in 97, what happened in 96, 97, Daimler took a first big initiative to merge with Chrysler and then also with Mitsubishi. And so you had the constitution of a group which was Daimler, Chrysler, Mitsubishi, which was supposed to be a merger of equals, and which was celebrated by all the media by saying, this is going to be the powerhouse of the future, this is where the industry is going. 2 years later, we did the Renault-Nissan alliance on a completely different terms. And obviously, we were looked at as, to use a term, not very elegant, but I think very expressive of the mentality at that moment. One of the CEO of our major competitors said, two mules don't make a racehorse, qualifying the Renault Nissan. And frankly, which is very interesting because, again, I consider being a mule is a quality in the car industry because it's a very tough path. It's mountains and climbs, and mule resist more than horses into this kind of environment. And it's very true that the racehorse, as you know, which was a Daimler, Chrysler, Mitsubishi, collapsed. It collapsed with huge damage because it destroyed a lot of value for Daimler. Chrysler, as you know, didn't survive it because they were, taken by Cerberus. Then they collapsed. Then the U.S. government saved them. Then Fiat Chrysler came, etc., etc. They never overcome these problems. And Mitsubishi also has been strongly weakened by this. So when you make the wrong move in terms of alliance, if it's not successful, it's deeply damaging. Mercedes lost 10 years into this. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, of the emergence of Audi as a powerhouse was the fact that Daimler, instead of continuing to ensure the leadership into the premium segment, just got diverted for many years trying to make things work, and they didn't work. Now, we took a completely different path because obviously we recognized that we were not as attractive as the Daimler, etc., Mitsubishi, and we said, no, we're not going to be a merger of equal. We're not merger at all. We are two partners working together. And we know our weaknesses and we know the opportunities. And what was important is the fact that we said, this is a partnership, and we worked like partners. And I made sure during all these years that never, ever Renault influenced Nissan, or Nissan influenced Renault, or decisions for Renault were taken from Tokyo, or decisions for Nissan were taken from Paris, maintaining the executive committee separate, the board separate, the two companies separate. And we discovered by acting, that the fact that you respect different identities, you get people motivated. When you start to blur identities, and people are confused because they don't know for whom they are working, well, then you're going to start to be lost in translation in a certain way because you don't know who you will be working with, who you will be working for. And I think the strength of the alliance is we had different entities working together for their own benefit, still maintaining this strong link, but still being themselves. The Nissan people are still Japanese company based in Japan, proud of their brand and what they're doing. The Renault people are French, based in France, continue to be proud of Renault. The two companies are working together, have been working together for 17 years. They have created a lot of value for each one of them. They have established themselves. Today we are the fourth largest automotive group, and we continue to build bridges with other companies. We have a strategic partnership with Daimler. We have a strategic partnership with Mitsubishi, and it's working well and it's productive. All of this is based on the fact that partnership is partnership. It's not partnership on a PowerPoint and the reality is different. It's not trying to be smart by saying, okay, I'm going to say that, I'm going to do something different, I'm going to think something different, or I'm going to prepare something different. Extremely simple strategy, followed 100% by top management without any exception. And at the end of the day, when you're truthful, it delivers.
Well, let's talk about the changes going on in the auto industry, in particular with disruptions around new technologies. There are a lot of things that you are leading in the industry, and maybe we can first start with electric vehicles.
Yeah.
The Leaf is one of the first big pushes into electric vehicles. Talk about your strategy there and how you see things going forward with low oil prices. How does that change the strategy? What is the long term for electric vehicles?
Okay. Well, first, obviously, we've been pioneer on electric cars. I'm talking about mass-marketed electric cars. I'm not talking. Electric car has existed in the industry from the beginning of the industry. We tried to make electric cars work. It didn't work, and it didn't work because there was no battery. Now, we were the first one in 2006 to launch to say we're going to go with electric car and we're going to mass market it because there is no way this industry is going to survive without zero-emission transportation. We said it in 2006, 2007. We invested massively, moved into it. Today, the Leaf is the most sold electric car in the world, and the Alliance has 50% of market share on electric car globally, not only with Leaf, the E and V200 of Nissan, but also with Zoe of Renault, Twizy, etc. Many cars have been developed. What was the vision? The vision was very simple. First, you remember 2006, 2007, energy price was very high, particularly oil was around $100 the barrel, and there were a lot of provision that, oil can continue to be very expensive. We say, okay, we cannot be an industry depending only on oil. We need to substitute with another source of energy. That's point number one. Point number two was emissions. Emissions were getting stricter. We know what is the situation today. So there is no way that transportation industry, which represent 17% of all CO2 emissions in the world, can continue to develop normally with a problem on emission, and particularly with the development coming on the emerging markets. So we said we need disruption here, and the disruption is the electric car, because this is a zero emission, and it will help us on the emission side, and also it helps us diversify from oil. This was the thought in 2006, 2007. So we started with the electric car. Obviously, as you know, in terms of sales, electric car is not this huge successful sales for two reasons. Technically, it's a huge success because it's a normal car. Everybody agrees on it today. But the problem is that a lot of people interested in electric car are not buying it because they don't see the charging infrastructure. They drive the Leaf, they're living in an apartment in downtown, and they say, okay, where am I going to charge the car? Okay, and if I want to make a long distance, where I'm going to stop? Eventually, if I charge it at home, and I have 300 kilometers, and you have an autonomy of 120, where am I going to stop? Am I going to find a charging station? So this is number one. Number two, still a lot of people consider it that it's expensive. $30,000 electric car, consider it's expensive. They're waiting for the price to go down. That's from one point. From the other point, as you know very well, emissions are getting stricter. COP21 was agreed in Paris 2 months ago. COP21 conclusion was we are on a trend to have additional 4 degrees of heating of the planet, and everybody says we don't know where we are going there. We need to limit this to 2 degrees. And everybody, all the head of states, participants congratulate each other by saying, okay, we have the same conclusion, no more than 2 degrees. Okay? Now the tough jobs start. How do you reach 2 degrees? How do you go from +4 to +2? And this is the job which is being done today and should be concluded at COP22 in Morocco, taking place next year. Except that in order to make this difference from +4 to +2, there's going to be massive demand on the energy sector, transportation sector, agriculture sector. And we think that this is going to be mandatory to have a substantial part of cars, transportation, electric, zero emission. There where it's come. So we're ready for it. Obviously, China is pushing a lot. As you know, the United States, depending on the states, we have more favorable market than other. Norway, France, the UK are pushing. So little by little, it's coming. So I believe that the future of our industry is going to rely in big part to zero emission, and particularly to electric car, because this is an existing technology and is mass marketable. That's for electric car.
And so a big part of that depends on government regulations.
Yes.
We are here in Washington, D.C. If you had a chance, and I'm sure you do at times, to talk with policymakers here, what advice or what requests would you make of government leaders when it comes to electric vehicles or any other piece of this
Infrastructure. We need charging station. That's all. I mean, I'm sure everybody bought a car, internal combustion engine. I bought many cars in the past before joining a car maker. I never, ever ask a question about what's the autonomy of my car. I never. Can it make with the full... How many miles can I make? I never asked a question. Why? Because there was gasoline station all over the place. I didn't care. If it did 300 kilometers or 400 or 250, I didn't care because you have gasoline station all over the territory. Today, people buying electric car, first question is, where are the charging station? If I don't see charging station, then I start to be preoccupied with what is the autonomy of my car. So the only thing we're telling Washington, Beijing, Paris, Berlin, build the infrastructure. And it's not a very expensive infrastructure. Charging stations are relatively cheap, particularly compared to gasoline station or compared to hydrogen station. Imagine when you're going to go to fuel cell. Hydrogen stations are very expensive in installation. So we're saying, please put the charging infrastructure. Japan is doing it today. There is more than 30,000 stations in Japan, and we're seeing with this, the fact that the sales of electric car going up, you have some state cities where the charging infrastructure is developing. That's the main message.
Great. Well, shifting gears to another new technology, connected cars.
Yeah.
We see commercials on TV now. There's a wide spectrum of different pieces of technology that are helping cars be more and more connected. How is the alliance proceeding in that arena?
Well, we're investing a lot in connected cars, and by the way, I mean I don't want to leave connected independently of autonomous. They go together. And I think this is part of the future is being built today. All car makers are investing for a very simple reason, because we are shifting from the car being an automobile, which means something which moves you. That's what the car is. That means if I'm buying a car, it's to move my body from one place to the other. Okay? So I'm moving from an automobile to a connected mobile space. Okay? Connected mobile space. And you're going to see the big difference, which means that I'm moving from something which is going to help me move from one point to the other to something which is going to help me move from one point to the other. At the same time, I can be connected, I can work, and I can decide whenever I want to drive and whenever I want the car to drive for me. That's the revolution that is taking place today. I'm not even talking about driverless cars, you know, the Google car or whatever. We'll talk about it after. I think this is taking place now, the autonomous connected car. Now, a lot of technologies. And it's possible today. Why? Because technology has evolved. Today we have sensors that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago, which are allowing autonomous car to become a reality. We have cameras, very cheap, very accurate, didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. They are existing today. We have lasers, we have radars. That means you have a lot of pieces of technology allowing the autonomous and connected car to become a reality. And we're moving there for 2 reasons. First one is safety. 95% of the accidents of the road are due to human error. When you go to autonomous car, you are reducing human interaction with the car. And in this case, you're going to reduce a lot of the 95% of accident. Second, as you know, the new generation coming is very connected. Okay, it's you know, I think a lot of people don't like to be in a car because, you know, they don't have the connection they need. So we need to build the technology, and we need to make the car a space where you are as connected as in the office or as in the house. And it's possible. So all car makers are doing this. It's not an easy challenge because we have some technical challenges, but also we have some regulatory challenge. Because today, in many countries, when you drive a car, you're supposed to be hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. That's it. So if you keep the regulation, hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, you don't need an autonomous car. Because if the car drives by itself, but you still have to keep your hands on the wheel and look at the road, I mean, there is no advantage. It's going to be only cost for you. And autonomous car, even if you can take your hands off the wheel, and your eyes from the road, you need to do something. Because if you have nothing to do into the car, then, you know, there is absolutely no advantage. That's why the connected car intervened. Because if you have a connected car, then you can have a video conference, you can check with your doctor, you can teach your kid, you can talk with friends, etc., etc. So there are a lot of things coming together to transform the product as it is. And you know, the Apple, the Google of the world did not miss it. They know that this is going to make the car much more attractive, exactly like the telephone, which was a very boring instrument a few years ago, now becoming an indispensable tool, which is at the same time a computer, a video maker, a TV, a telephone, etc.
So in the future, will you be competing with Apple and Google on the future of cars?
No. That means this is all marketing, science fiction, saying, you know, I mean, it's interesting to see how much, you know, people are saying, yeah, you know, car makers are dinosaurs, they are gone. Now there is a new word coming where Apple, Google, Tesla, etc. are gonna, there are 85 million cars produced and sold in 2015. We did it. Okay? So we're occupying the ground now. Okay? Maybe in the future we won't. We have to pay attention. But for the moment, this industry, which is an industry of $2 trillion, we are occupying the land. And frankly, we are conscious on the fact that if we don't move, somebody's going to come and eat our lunch. We know that, okay? So all car makers are investing and are partnering with tech companies, et cetera, in order to make sure that this evolution of the product is going to be made in a way which is controlled by our car makers. And, and in fact, that's what the public is expecting. We at Davos, we had a big meeting where Boston Consulting Group made a survey with about 7,000 people from different countries and asking them the questions, okay, are you favorable to autonomous cars? They said all majority yes. Where would you buy an autonomous car from? This was an interesting question. And they give them the choice, Google, Apple, Tesla, et cetera, et cetera. They all said car maker. Why? Because, as you know, consumers are conservative. They have a relationship with the dealer. They don't know what is a car maker. They have the dealers. They know the dealer. They deal with him. The car is a complicated stuff. They want to be reassured. They want to touch the product. It's not a rational buy. Buying a car is not rational. Because if the car was only a rational buy, you wouldn't have as much SUVs and 4x4 and sports car and 250 kilometers hour, But why do you need all of that? Because most of the people are driving them in condition where you don't go more than 70 miles an hour. You're going to have one or two people in the car where you have a free range kind of. There is a part which is irrational into buying a car. There is an emotional part of the car that we should not put on the side. And this is something that we have been dealing with and we're going to have to continue to deal with. So we're going to build the rational side, but also keep the very emotional side in the car business. So we welcome the challenge. We think if we don't move, somebody will move and take our place. I think there is an uncertainty, but at the end of the day, who's going to prevail? But frankly, I think it's a good thing because it's going to maintain competition and creativity on the spot.
So one of the things that we teach in the entrepreneurship program is to look for big fundamental shifts in regulation and technology and consumer behavior. We see a lot of that going on in the auto industry. Oh, yeah. If you were not the CEO of a large company, if you were an entrepreneur looking to find some way to get into the auto industry, what would you be looking for, or what advice would you have for that entrepreneur?
Well, frankly, I would look at where the industry is moving: autonomous, drive, zero-emission cars, low-emission cars, connectivity of the car. This is where the industry is moving, and I try to create a company that can bring a contribution to this move. I think there are a huge number of startups trying to develop modules or pieces to allow these technology to happen. And we're dealing with some of them, by the way. We have an office in Palo Alto, which main mission with about 100 people. And the main mission is to scrutinize what the startup is doing. And we call them and say, okay, if you have something for the transportation, please come tell us about it. And from time to time, we are investing with them. From time to time, we are listening to them. From time to time, we can be buying stuff from them. So we're not closed. We're trying to open up and see if there is something from this huge, creative world with the startup that can contribute to our objective. So frankly, if somebody have a good idea, because there are a lot of pieces of technology that are going to be necessary to make this happen, welcome, because there are going to be a lot of new suppliers coming through this field.
So I have one last question, and then we're going to open up to the audience. I think we have somebody with a mic. Is that right? Over here? Okay. Beatrice will, so raise your hand if you have a question. But while we're getting ready for that first audience question, my last question, I understand that you attended a Jesuit school as part of growing up. Here we are at Jesuit University, where one of the key things we talk about is how companies and how our business ethics and how our business activities affect society around us. You've already shared some of your thoughts on climate change, and we can tell that you think about these things. How does that, the ethics of business and the morality of the decisions you make, how often do you think about that, and how does that affect the way you lead these companies?
Well, yes, I've been at school with the Jesuit in one school practically for 11 years. All my secondary school were made at the Jesuit. And I think that on top, it's a very specific education where systematically there is a lot of focus on value, there is a lot of focus on morale, there is a lot of focus on society. But also there is a strict sense of discipline. We were by far the most disciplined bunch from all the colleges that existing in the country. We worked hard. And I think my memory is that if you go through a Jesuit school, you're going to get a lot of advantages. One of them is you can't be satisfied with action. You always need a purpose for your action. That's a big lesson. I mean, don't rush into something, but think what's the purpose behind it. Because the purpose is going to create much more motivation for you and depth in order to sustain the difficulties that you're going to face into when you enter in action. And the Jesuits teach you that from the beginning, obviously with some kind of religious focus, but it goes beyond religion, where you say always look at the purpose, because the purpose is going to give the meaning for what you're doing. That was number one. And second, very strict discipline, very strict discipline. We were working very, very, very hard. And frankly, obviously when you're going to go into the corporate world, and particularly in a very competitive part, that means discipline is extremely important, extremely important. Somebody said with a little bit of discipline, you can do a little, and with total discipline, there's nothing that you cannot do. I think it's very true that, by teaching and learning and knowing and in a certain way respecting some discipline, you're gonna do much more. I'm not talking about other ability which are gonna make a difference, but already making sense of your actions and having the discipline as a basic value in you are very strong element. And frankly, I learned it from my years at the Jesuit school.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to turn over now to our audience to begin asking some questions. So raise those hands high and look for the microphone. Please introduce yourself. We are recording video recording this, so we want to make sure that you can hear. Go ahead and stand up, introduce yourself, and ask your question. Thanks.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm Adam. I'm a first year in the college. So in talking about disruptive leadership, how do you ensure that the leadership is not iterative of what everyone else in the industry or the sector is doing, but at the same time is not so outlandish that everyone just dismisses it as radical and never gains any traction? How do you guarantee that your leadership is truly transformative?
Yeah. Well, you don't. No, frankly, you don't. You don't. I mean, this was a very important question. Thank you for asking it, because this was a team that we had also recently. Again, I'm sorry, I'm coming back to Davos because I was sitting with, I think, the head of AT&T, and the question was, in an evolution of the industry where you have to transform your company and your product every 2-3 years, and often it takes maybe 7-8 years to test a technology, a new technology, and the average tenure of a CEO is 4 years. So if the average tenure of a CEO is 4 years, and it takes 7 or 8 years for the technology to mature, how do you match that? Because if a CEO is starting with a new technology and after 3 years this technology did not deliver, you can have a lot of shareholders saying, you guys wasting the money, you are on the wrong path. And frankly, I had a lot of people saying, what are you doing with electric cars? In 2006, we invested 4 billion euro. Some people say, you wasted the money of the company. In 2008, 2009, 2010, 2012, people saying, we're not seeing these huge sales that we were expecting. So the best way to keep people on board, to keep people on board while you're developing the technology is making sure first that on the normal business you deliver a strong performance, because this is your best network, safety net. And because you're delivering on the normal business a strong performance, people will allow you from time to time to say, okay, he's playing with electric cars or he's playing with this, etc., but he's delivering the results. But if you don't have on the normal business a good performance, I'm afraid you're not going to be in the 4 year CEO tenure, but maybe a couple of years, So You have to do both. You have to be very careful about delivering strong performance on the normal business, and this will allow you to have some kind of benefit of the doubt into trying to make a breakthrough in something else. Because people like innovation, adore innovation, read about innovation, but when it's your own money, you don't like it. You know, you want a return, you want your dividend, you want the profit. Then if on top of this you get innovation, fine. But if you say, yeah, well, I'm sorry, because of the innovation, we're going to have to reduce our dividend. Now you are in a very dangerous situation. So I would say I have to do both, and you're never sure. You're never sure. But the most you perform on the normal business, the more shareholder will be patient with you, because disruption, and particularly technological disruption, is going to require more and more time to deliver results.
Great. I think we have another question over here.
Hi, my name is Sahal Kango. I'm an evening MBA student. My question is kind of what you were talking about earlier with driverless cars. In 20, 30 years, do you think there's going to be a shift in selling to companies like Uber or taxi companies versus selling to a consumer? And if so, how is Nissan and Renault handling that?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, nobody can tell you, in 20 years that's what's going to happen. Nobody knows. Okay, but I'm not sure. I'm going to tell you why. Obviously, the driverless car is a rational decision. Okay, for Uber, it's a rational decision. What's the reasoning of Uber? The reasoning of Uber is very simple. They are reasoning cost. They say, okay, today I have an Uber car. Let's suppose it's an electric car. On a monthly basis, the lease of the car is about $200. The electricity to run the car all the time is about $100. So it's $300 a month. And the driver is $4,000. Okay? So he has $100, $200 from one side, $4,000 from the other side. So Uber say, I need to get rid of the driver. That's the way I'm going to get 90% of the cost out. That's it. And it makes a lot of sense for their system. So they're working into driverless cars because they can say, if I have driverless cars, I'm going to king of the world because I'm going to cut 90% of the talks of the cost, and I'm going to kill the taxi world because they're never going to be able to compete with me. So that's one thing. And you can say, well, then everything is going to become like this. No, wait a moment. Connectivity. What's happening with the connectivity? Think about the telephone. All of you have an iPhone. Telephone was 10 or 15 years ago was a pure calling device. Today is a connected device with your email, your photo, your videos, your whatever, a lot of things which are very personal, your photos, everything. So 15 years ago, you were sharing your telephone with anybody, asking you, give me your phone, no problem. Today, somebody asks for your phone, you say, I'm sorry, no. Why? Because you have everything which is personal inside. Well, when the car is going to be connected, guess what? What's going to happen? You're going to have your emails, you're going to have your photos, your videos, your images. Your mom is going to pop up on the screen at a certain point in time. Your girlfriend or your boyfriend, etc. You don't want to share that. This is your personal space. So I think, even though I recognize that the shared cars is going to increase compared to today. By the way, today is less than 1% of the world market. It may go to 2% or 3%, no problem. But the majority of the markets, because of the connectivity of the car, is going to remain a personal mobile space. That's my take on it. Again, it's no certainty. That's my vision. We have to make sure that it's real all the time with the development of technology. But I bet that the car is going to become as personal as your telephone.
Randy Sim, do you expect China to become a major exporter of cars?
It will become an exporter of cars. A major exporter of cars, I don't think so, as long as they keep the rule. You know today that in China, car makers cannot be on their own. They have to create joint ventures. So, for example, Nissan in China owns 50% of its company. All car makers, Toyota, General Motors, etc. You cannot own 100% of your company in China. You have to have a Chinese partner. And usually the Chinese partner is a state-owned enterprise, which share with you 50%, 50% of the investments, 50% of the profit or of the losses, everything. So what happens? Well, we don't export from China. Why? Because when I export from China, I have to share the profit with my partner. If I have the possibility to export from Japan, if I export from Japan, I have 100% of the profit. If I export from Korea, I have 100% of the profit. If I export from China, I have only 50% of the profit. So guess what? What the consequence of this is there practically no export from the major car maker in China because they are forced into a joint venture. Okay? Who export then from China? The purely Chinese players, which, by the way, represent today 1/3 of the Chinese market. You have the foreign joint venture representing 2/3 of the Chinese market. The Chinese maker, purely Chinese maker, represent 1/3 of the Chinese market. These people export because they own 100% of their company. So I think the biggest limitation for export from China is this, and this is not about to change. So that's why I'm saying, yes, there will be export from China, mainly from the Chinese maker, but the foreign joint venture will not export because there is no interest for them to export. They prefer to export from another country where they own 100% of the assets.
Great. Another question over here.
Thanks for being here, Mr. Ghosn. Really appreciate it. I am an evening program student at the business school. My name is Mike Jenkins, and as an automotive enthusiast and someone who wants to enter the market at graduation, it really encouraged me that you talked about the emotion of driving, and kind of circling back to the autonomous driving question. As someone who still enjoys driving and isn't necessarily needing to be connected to anything other than the gears and the wheel and the engine, how do you plan to maintain the joy of driving with autonomous drive, like with your future GTR, with hybrid, et cetera?
Autonomous drive, manual drive. That's what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Autonomous drive doesn't mean no matter what, the car is going to drive by itself. No, you decide. That's why we are very convinced about more autonomous drive than driverless cars, because in the autonomous drive, you decide. If you want to drive a car normally, manually, you can. Okay? But the joy of driving, unfortunately, doesn't exist when you are in a traffic jam. So when you're in a traffic jam waiting, and most of the people spend, people spend in average 2 hours in their car in the world. And in some part of the world, they spend 4 hours in the car. And when they spend more than 4 hours, most of it is in a traffic jam. This is where autonomous drive is going to be great, because then you can put it on autonomous drive and then do something else. And the car is going to drive you there. And then you can switch to manual whenever you are in a good scenery or in the mountain. So I don't want you to think autonomous drive is going to take anything of the pleasure of driving. You decide. You are empowered. You can use it whenever you want, and you can switch it whenever you want.
And we have an HR executive from the company
Yeah,
here.
we are.
So for those of you looking for jobs.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, she's watching you guys.
Wonderful. Another question over here.
Thank you very much for your talk. My name is Joshua DeGastine. I'm here with StartUpHoyas Med and the Insight Fellowship. You've been talking a lot about connectivity, and I'm curious about what HR and hiring looks like for that. How do you check with the software engineers to make sure that they're going to be able to work with the hardware engineers that you've had to hire in the past? And what do you look for in coders and data scientists?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because this is exactly the challenge we have today. We need to hire hundreds and thousands of software engineers. We need them. We know it. We know exactly what the past, what we need to do. And I think the people who are asking us to do that are the engineers of the company who said, we're not going to be able to develop the autonomous drive, the connected car, without having a very strong arm, being able to write software, to adapt software. Okay? So I think they're going to be working well together for a very simple reason, is that the existing core of engineering, which is mainly mechanical, material, etc., is saying we cannot make it if we don't have a strong computer science software engineering coming. And I think the car industry is going to be one of the largest employer of software engineers and computer scientists. Now, and you know, this is a world market. So obviously, in the United States, finding a software engineer is very hard because you have competition of all the tech companies. Okay, one, it's very expensive, and second, it's very hard. You don't find them. So obviously, we're trying to do in the U.S., but also we're going all over the place on the globe. You know, we're going to India, we're going to China, we're going to Vietnam, we're going to many countries that are graduating a lot of engineers and trying to hire some of the people, because today you don't have to be located in one particular place in order to do this job. You can be located anywhere in the world in order to do that. But this is a challenge we face, yes, to how to marry the different discipline. But what I can tell you is today, all car makers know that they cannot make it in the future without strengthening their capacity to write softwares, and particularly their ability to have their own computer scientists.
Over here.
Good evening, Mr. Ghosn. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Olivier Rogereux, first-year MBA student. You talked a lot about the business model, the way that the customer value proposition will evolve from getting from point A to point B to from getting from point A to point B and the connectivity aspect. What about the profit model? Do you think that the level of investment will evolve, and also the way that you're making money from selling a car to maybe selling batteries or having maintenance contract that will evolve? How does that? Yeah. How is it going to change?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think we have a couple of overheads that we can show you. Yeah, this is you can see here. Yeah, this is a very classical question, and that's why I want to make some comments standing up here. This is our market today, $3.5 trillion. I think it's dollar or euro. No, dollars. $3.5 trillion. This is the automotive market. And this automotive market is made by, you know, 2.7 trillion, which is the one-time vehicle sales, which is, by the way, new cars and used car. And then you have $720 billion of aftermarket parts sale, accessories, etc. And then you have about $30 billion, which are what we call the new automotive revenues. And the new automotive revenues are applications, services, which is starting. Very small pieces. And the projection, and this is McKinsey study, saying, well, 15 years down the road, this is what's going to happen. The one-time vehicle sales continue to grow, $4 trillion. Aftermarket will continue to grow, and new automotive revenue is going to explode. Okay? So what we need to look is about, you know, and this, our market in 15 years is going to practically double. And we have to make a decision about where do we want to compete. We can stay in one-time vehicle sales company, but we're going to have a reduced part of the pie. But most of the car makers are going to go for the three of them. They're going to say, okay, I want to make sure that I'm going to be contributing on one-time vehicle sales, aftermarket, and new automotive revenues, because the new automotive revenue with a 30% growth per year is going to be extremely profitable part of the pie. Okay? So again, when you make investments, you're going to make investment by saying, okay, where am I investing and for what? And I can tell you that means the blue, the clear blue part is going to be extremely profitable. Today, most of the profit of the car industry are made in the aftermarket. It's a smaller pie, very high profit. So usually, every time you have a new segment opening up, this is where most of the profit is going to be made.
We have time for maybe one more question. Yes.
Hi, I'm an alumna, graduated over a decade ago, and I have worked for various tech companies that followed different visions, such as like the Toyota production system. And I wonder, without giving out too much information, if you have two different visions for Renault and for Nissan, understanding that they're two different cultures. Is it one combined vision, and how do you get all employees to come on board? Yeah. How do you motivate?
Yeah. Well, no, it's not one vision for the two companies. There is one vision for the alliance, which is specific about the kind of relationship existing between the two companies, where we say each company is on its own, but we develop synergies. The synergy should never be on detriment of the customers. The customers should never see the synergies. The customers should never have a doubt on the fact that Renault car is a French car, that the Nissan car is a Japanese car, and there is no cannibalization between the two brands. By the way, this was the largest risk that people were foreseeing for our partnership. It never materialized. 17 years after, nobody in any market is going to hesitate between a Nissan car and a Renault car, because Nissan is cross-shopped with Toyota, with Honda, with Hyundai, with Kia, with even some of the Chinese company, while Renault is cross-shopped with Volkswagen, with Fiat, with Peugeot, with Citroën, with Opel, etc. So we're in a completely different world. So Alliance has a vision. Each company has its own vision. Obviously, there are some common ground in terms of values, but the visions are different, and they are specific to each company and to the history of each company. So answering your question, it's not a common vision.
So in respect for your time, right? I know we have to get out of here in a few minutes. You're one of the busiest people in the world, I can imagine, splitting time between Paris and Tokyo. Can you tell us what a typical week or a typical month, or I know you have to be scheduled so far out. You have an auto show in New York tomorrow. How do you manage all this?
There is no typical week. There is no typical. No, my scheduling usually is on a one-year base, which means we are in March. Today, I know exactly where I'm going to be every single day of this year. I have an assistant who is present here. If I tell her now where I'm going to be on December the 12th, she's going to tell me, you're going to be there, you're going to have an executive committee of this company, you're going to have a board meeting, you're going to have a nomination committee, etc. And this is not a question that we are obsessed with this. I mean, it is impossible to do the job or the mission in which we are, where you're managing two large corporations based on two continents, if you don't have a strict discipline and planification on your time. So there is not one week which looks like another one. There is no routine. You better get acquainted and know how to deal with jet lags, because people are waiting for you. Okay, so they don't care about you traveled 14 hours coming from Tokyo, etc. You land at 5 o'clock in the morning. You got to take a shower. You are at 8 o'clock in Paris. People are saying, "Oh, okay, finally he's here. I'm going to be able to dump my problems, answer questions, etc." They don't care. You slept, you didn't sleep, you're in good shape, you're jet lagged. They don't care. So you're going to have to care about that. And for this, it's organization, it's discipline, is a lot of it's specific diets, I would say, in order to cope with that. That's what makes me say I would not recommend that somebody does this job after me. What I would recommend is, maintaining one CEO for Renault, another CEO for Nissan, and having a kind of board to manage the alliance, because it is very taxing. It is very taxing because, as you know very well already, the job of being CEO of one company is tough, two company square, and then you never have a peaceful moment, never. Because usually in a company you have always problems going on. So when you have two companies, the likelihood that you have period of serenity is reduced to zero, because you have always a crisis coming somewhere. So that's what I say. I say a lot of discipline, good organization, very good staff around you, very professional people, who are helping you be always on track, which forces you, in fact, to have good teams, because you cannot do this without a very strong teams.
Well, as we close here, maybe I'd ask the Renault-Nissan team to stand up. I know some of our students here may want to come find you or talk to you here. So please, we thank you all for being here as well. We've got a great contingent. Thank you for helping make this possible, for making all of this possible. And thank you to our audience. Thank you very much. Join me in thanking Mr. Ghosn, and I wish everyone a wonderful evening. If you're interested in learning more about our entrepreneurship programs, we have more events. Our campus-wide pitch competition is coming up. A lot of great stuff. Check us out at StartUpHoyas.com. With that, join me in thanking Mr. Ghosn very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.